Bethesda's Starfield has proven to be one of the most controversial games of the year. I've been thinking about it again recently due to its status with the Game Awards. While Starfield was nominated for Best RPG Game, it didn't win, and the game was not nominated for Game of the Year. I only mention this because Starfield was marketed as a game of the generation, something that would change the industry. Is that what we got? Well, I guess that's going to depend who you ask. But what's not debatable is that Xbox and Bethesda are going to be very disappointed that they are not in the Game of the Year conversation. And there's a whole nother interesting element to this. The initial response to Starfield was very good, but for whatever reason, the public perception of the game is becoming increasingly negative as time goes on. A lot of this is just like rage bait discourse that really isn't worth discussing. There's a lot of people who just don't like Xbox or don't like Bethesda and therefore want to tear the game down. There's also a lot of people just using the game for clicks, such as that pointless article talking about player count, as if the game is a live service product and not a single player game with a definitive ending. At the same time, some of the discussion has been genuine, with players pointing out many of the very real faults within Starfield. As I personally reflect on my time with the game, I'm left really conflicted. I don't know if I've ever been so unsure of my opinion on a game before. I hope that through making this video, I will be able to come to a definitive conclusion. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Starfield was first announced in 2018 at Bethesda's E3 press conference. This was a huge announcement, as it was going to be Bethesda's first new IP in a very long time. The game was basically just teased with a logo reveal and nothing more. We finally got a good look at the game in 2021 at Microsoft Bethesda's joint E3 conference. In typical Bethesda fashion, they were really talking this game up. They wanted to make sure you knew this was going to be their biggest game yet. Initially, the game was set to be released on November 11th, 2022, but was later delayed until the first half of 2023. There was another slight delay, with the final release date being September 6th, 2023. Insert that Miyamoto quote that he didn't even actually say. Regardless, expectations were high as launch grew closer, and oh boy, Xbox and Bethesda both really needed this game to hit the mark. Xbox has started to build a reputation of poor first-party titles, and they had yet to really hit in the Series X and S generation. As for Bethesda, they were coming off one of their worst games ever with Redfall. Both of these companies needed a win, and Starfield was stacking up to have a really good chance. As launch day grew closer, it was time for reviews to come out, and the reception was very good, but maybe not quite as high as people would have hoped. I think a game with this much hype is the type of game you expect, or at least hope to see hit the 90s on websites like Metacritic. The game did get close to that though, sitting at an 86. Before I continue on, I do just want to say, I think Metacritic has really harmed the way people talk about games. Nowadays, if a game doesn't get a 90 plus on Metacritic, people act like the game is bad, and that's just stupid. Regardless, Starfield not hitting the 90s is relevant to this discussion. The main reason the game wasn't able to hit that is because the game actually received a good amount of 7s, such as from IGN. Again, 7 is seen as a bad score, which really isn't the case. For me, when I see a game get a 6 or a 7, it essentially means it's not bad, but it's going to be up to the individual to play it and see what they think. Despite this, seeing Starfield getting a lot of 7s was genuinely surprising. Initially, people reacted with anger, claiming that those who gave the game a 7 were just biased against Xbox. And those claims did seem to have some value at first, because when the game was released to the public, the reception was initially fantastic. People were blown away by the scope of the game's world. Many were saying how they had spent hours in the game without even getting through any of the main story quests, just looking around and seeing what they could find. At the same time, there was a lot of talk about the game really picking up later on, including when you would hit New Game Plus. People were also extremely impressed by the game's shipbuilding mechanics. Based on the reviews and receptions that I was seeing, I decided to take the plunge and buy Starfield on day one. I feel like I should mention an important piece of context for me here. I was really craving an open world RPG. This is one of those genres where if I'm not in the mood for it, I'm almost unable to even play them. But when I get that itch, I can really get into them. Well, I had that itch for a few weeks leading up to Starfield's launch. I really wanted to play one of these games, and I was looking at my backlog for potential options, but in the back of my head, I knew Starfield was coming soon. If I was going to enjoy Starfield, I had to make sure I was still in this mood, so that's exactly what I did. I waited, and I bought Starfield while I was in that open world RPG mood. So it's probably for that reason that Starfield absolutely hooked me. I started pouring hours into the game. I was super into the setting and the story that was playing out. Overall, I was enjoying myself, but I'm not totally sure why, honestly. Let me explain. I remember talking to my friend about the game, and I said something along the lines of, I'm not really loving it, but it's the only thing I want to play right now. It's probably the most confused I've ever felt about a game. Right off the bat, I wasn't too fond of any of the characters, and that did stay true throughout the whole game. I felt the companions were all pretty annoying and oftentimes would hinder your ability to play the game with certain playstyles. This isn't that big of a deal though, because you can just choose to play without a companion. And I also know this isn't that popular of an opinion. I know many people were big fans of the characters, especially Sarah. Sadly, I didn't get to have a lot of time with Sarah. If you know, you know. Anyways, if I had to pick a favorite side character, it would definitely be Sam Coe, although like I said, I really didn't like any of them that much, honestly, which was disappointing. Also, the game definitely did not feel like a huge step up for Bethesda. Many people have called this game Fallout 4 in space, and yeah, I can see that. They really didn't seem to improve this engine much, if even at all. Your interactions with the characters are exactly as you would expect it from all of Bethesda's previous games. I will say though, I think they did a great job with the combat. I think it's definitely the best combat Bethesda has ever had. The gunplay is immediately such a step up from Fallout 4, and when you combine that with the powers you get throughout the game, it's even better. I would also say the other biggest evolution for Bethesda was of course the ship combat. I saw a lot of people praising the shipbuilder as one of the best parts in the game, and for the pure creativity and amount of possibilities it has, I would agree. Although I never got into it myself though, primarily because I didn't really like the ship combat at all. It seemed like really unnecessarily difficult to the point where I almost think I must have been doing something wrong. Meanwhile, I was enjoying the quests in the game as I felt they gave a decent variety of tasks and nice side storylines. When I play these kinds of games, I will go through the main story while doing all the side missions that pique my interest, but I will also skip a lot of them to save for later, or maybe just not do them at all if I don't feel like it. Point is, I often get overwhelmed in games like this if I try to feel like I need to do everything. But with that said, I did do a decent amount of side missions that I really enjoyed. My character becoming a Freestar Ranger and finding the Mantis were the highlights for me. The worst quests in the game were definitely the ones where you would get new powers, as it was just doing the same copy and paste puzzle, if you could even call it that, over and over again. And I think this is the part where I should talk about my biggest issue with the game, which was the planet exploration. Obviously, we all know about the fast travel controversy, but personally, I didn't really mind that. I wasn't going to want to spend 10 minutes flying from one planet to the other anyway. If you're into that, more power to you, but that's just not for me. So while I don't mind how the travel worked, the planets themselves were really lacking. There's just nothing to do on them unless they're tied to a quest. Now, I do understand what Bethesda was going for with this, I really do. They saw the way people played Skyrim for so many years, wanting to explore everything in that world, so they thought, what if we gave people near limitless amounts of areas to explore? Although that was certainly a good thought, it was a bit too ambitious. The planets are too empty to give that fun sense of exploration that Skyrim had. Bethesda went for quality over quantity, but in reality, that's not what we wanted. I think most players would have preferred having half as many planets if that meant that they were actually populated with things to do. Regardless, I had been chugging along through a lot of the side quests and was having a really good time. I ended up stopping at the first contact quest where you have to mine for a ton of materials because I just had no interest in doing that. So I went for the end of the main quest at this point. I enjoyed the ending of the game as I felt it was different and unique. For those that played the game, you know they set up a scenario where you can essentially play through the whole game again with the abilities and powers you gained. I see what they were going for with this as well, but I didn't have much interest in playing more after the 30 hours I had spent with Starfield. Okay, so there were all of my complaints laid out. Sounds like I hated the game, right? No, I loved playing through it. Despite all of these faults, the game had its grips on me. I played it literally every day for weeks and was genuinely addicted at times, not wanting to put the game down late into the night. I played those 30 hours in just about 10 days, which is a ton for me. I remember at times as I played through the game, I had various moments where I wondered to myself, am I actually enjoying this? Yet I never wanted to stop playing. It's truly one of the weirdest gaming experiences I have ever had, which is why I titled this video the way I did. I genuinely don't know if I liked Starfield or not. In a way, this level of uncertainty makes Starfield one of my favorite gaming experiences of the year. It made me feel something that I've never really felt from a game before. Starfield hooked me, and I still think about it months after playing. I think that in and of itself is a huge accomplishment, especially in a year that's so stacked with games. Starfield is an incredibly flawed game, but that almost makes me love it even more. Take away all the discourse, the Steam review bombing, the award shows, whatever else. Starfield made me feel something. I don't think I know what it made me feel, but I know it was something. And that's a lot more than I can say about most other games.